They are the insiders, Chris Johnston and Pierre LeBrun. Every injury creates an opportunity. That's what any coach will tell you. An injury almost 2 years ago cost one Leaf goaltender his job, and now another injury could swing that door back open again, CJ?
Yes, and that would be Matt Murray, who has been 625 days and counting since he made an appearance in the NHL in the regular season. And, well, it's obviously disappointing news for Anthony Stolarz and the Leafs that Stolarz has a knee injury that's going to keep him out 4 to 6 weeks. The sense is it's going to open up an opportunity here for Murray to at some point return to the Leafs crease. He missed all of last season after having a hip surgery, played a couple games at the very end in the AHL. He's been down the American Hockey League this year and recently returned from what was described to me as a minor injury. And so the Leafs want to see him get a few more starts there. He'll start Friday for the Marlies in Wilkes-Barre. But, you know, assuming everything goes well, I do think that everything is in place now for Murray to get a chance to come back to the NHL after more than a year away.
CJ, another piece of business for the Maple Leafs, of course, is the ongoing dialogue between the Leafs and their former captain, John Tavares, pending UFA on July 1st. And I don't think anything is imminent there at this point. I think part of that ongoing dialogue is certainly both sides want to see where the salary cap is headed. We were at the Board of Governors last week with Gino, and we know that there's two possibilities there, 92.5 for next year or a higher cap. Every dime counts when you're the Maple Leafs. But contract comparables that I know that have been talked about in that negotiation, Claude Giroux, 3 times $6.5 million that he signed in July 22, Andrzej Kopitar, 2-year extension, $7 million a year. Those are contracts certainly that I think are in the ballpark of what Tavares and the Leafs are talking about. However, you know, one contract that I don't think the Tavares camp has brought up is Steven Stamkos, 4 times $8 million a year. I think that Tavares aims to be lower than that if this gets done with Toronto at some point. They want to be fair. They also want to remain a Maple Leaf. So both sides, I think, mutually would like to get this done at some point before July 1st.
Now, the Christmas trade freeze kicks into effect at midnight this Thursday after a somewhat disappointing couple of months. We know the Canucks are going to be buyers, but are we starting to get a better idea of what they could be looking to buy, Pierre?
Yeah, Gino, judging from what we're hearing from league sources across the NHL, the Canucks are making their calls, and I think they've watched enough games from their team to have identified specific needs. One is a top 4D, and that's hardly surprising when you consider the impact from the injury to Filip Hronek. I mean, it's been massive, and you know, he will be back obviously before the end of the regular season, but the Canucks would still like to go out and add a top 4D if possible. The other is going out and adding a winger as well. So a couple of needs. And the one thing to remember in a Jim Rutherford / Patrick Allvin administration is they don't like waiting for the trade deadline March 7th. Last year, they traded for Elias Lindholm on January 31st. We know Rutherford's history in Carolina and Pittsburgh, and Allvin seems to want to continue that tradition.
Yeah, no doubt. The Sabres are another brutal tailspin, winless in their last 10, second to last in the East. So bad, their owner, Terry Bakula, traveled to Montreal to speak to the team today. CJ, what did Terry Bakula have to say to his team?
Well, he tried to clear the air. You know, that's my understanding of what happened. I think the idea was to show support, to show that he cares, and deliver a message, something along the lines of, the solution is inside these walls. It's not outside. Don't be waiting for a change. Don't be looking over your shoulder. Probably ignore all the hits like this one and all the newspaper clippings and the like, because you have to solve it here. And that's because it's a short-term view, right? You mentioned that holiday roster freeze is going to kick in here shortly, but you know, that doesn't mean the Sabres are out of trade talks. My impression from teams around the league is the Sabres have been pretty active in having those discussions. The message they're giving to teams, though, if you're coming after one of our best players, one of our top young players, we want one of yours back. It's not going to be a fire sale or anything like that.
Listen, while we could have guessed the Sabres were going to struggle, I don't think anyone expected to see what we're seeing from the Rangers right now. Peter Laviolette tried to make an example of Kaapo Kakko over the weekend, and not surprisingly, he wasn't very happy about it, CJ.
Well, certainly not surprised the player wasn't happy. He's been scratched a lot over the years, including in last year's playoffs. But what might be surprising is how open of his displeasure he was with the media in New York on this day, and basically said it's easy to take a young guy out of the lineup. I don't think I've been the worst player. And so I think that really, given the history here, the fact the Rangers have gauged the market on this player in the past, I think it's a sign of how frustrated he's getting and might be open to a change of scenery at some point in the future. This becomes a situation to watch because Kaapo Kakko is still just 23 years old, has all the promise that made him a top pick a few years ago, and a player I think could be on the move, probably on the other side of the roster freeze with that so close now.
he certainly doesn't like to speak his mind. They are the Insiders, Chris Johnston and Pierre LeBrun.